Someone might see.
Don't, someone might see. But the rancher did it anyway. And the whole town lost their minds. The warning came out in a whisper sharp enough to cut through the cool morning air. Don't, someone might see. The rancher didn't slow his horse. Dawn had only just loosened its grip on the valley. The sky still pale and stretched thin like milk and water. The smell of damp earth rose from the fields, and a low fog clung to the creek bed, curling around fence posts as if trying to hide them. The town lay just beyond the rise, small, stubborn, and already awake. He could feel it watching, the way you feel eyes even when you don't see faces. In this place nothing happened unnoticed. Not a new coat. Not a late return. And certainly not this. She stood by the gate with one hand wrapped tight around the wooden latch, knuckles white, the other pressing her shawl closed at her chest. Her hat sat crooked, pinned in haste, a dark braid slipping loose over her shoulder. There was fear in her eyes, but it wasn't fear of him. It was the familiar, exhausting fear of what followed him wherever he went. Talk, judgment, stories that grew teeth and claws by the time they reached the far end of town. He tipped his hat to her, a small, polite gesture that felt absurdly formal given how close they were standing. The horse stamped once, impatient. He swung down anyway, boots hitting the dirt with a solid, final thud that echoed louder than it should have. She flinched at the sound, her gaze darting toward the distant rooftops. "I told you," she said again, softer now, as if the warning might work better if it didn't sound like a plea. "If they see you here, if they see us." "I know," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which only seemed to make her more anxious. "I won't be long." Her mouth tightened. "That's what you said last time." He smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. Last time had been supposed to be quick, too. Quick conversations had a habit of stretching when neither of them wanted to be the first to walk away. She glanced back toward town, toward the main road that cut through the valley like a scar. Already there was movement, a figure sweeping a porch, smoke curling from a chimney, a wagon creaking to life. Windows reflected the rising sun, bright and watchful. "They talk," she said, the words heavy with experience. "They always do," he replied. He reached past her and pushed the gate open. The hinges groaned loud in the quiet morning, and she sucked in a breath as if the sound alone might summon witnesses. He stepped through without hesitation, onto land everyone had silently agreed he had no business setting foot on, land tied up in old arguments, old mistakes, and opinions that had never once asked him for his side of the story. When he turned back to her, he didn't lower his voice. He didn't glance over his shoulder. He simply held out his hand. For a moment she didn't take it. Her fingers trembled, hovering inches from his, and he could see the battle playing out behind her eyes. Sense against want. Caution against the deep aching tiredness of always being careful. Finally, she placed her hand in his. Her skin was cool, her grip uncertain, but once their fingers laced together, something in her shoulders eased, just a little. He led her forward, not toward the house, not toward any shadowed corner, but straight across the open yard toward the barn. Sunlight spilled over them, catching in her loose hair, glinting off the dust on his boots. Anyone looking up from town would have a clear view. No hiding, no backpath, just the simple, undeniable fact of them walking side by side. "You don't have to do this," she murmured, almost to herself. "I know," he said. "That's why I am." The barn loomed ahead, red paint weathered to the color of old blood, doors half open from the morning feeding. The smell of hay and leather wrapped around them as they stepped inside, familiar and grounding. For a moment the world narrowed to creaking beams and drifting dust motes, to the sound of their own breathing. She let go of his hand then, as if suddenly remembering herself, and busied herself with brushing straw from her skirt. "This isn't smart," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Since when have you cared about smart?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, really looked, and the answer sat between them unspoken. Since the town decided it would be easier to watch her than to listen. Since every choice she made became public property. Since his name became something people lowered their voices around. From outside, a distant shout drifted up the road, followed by laughter. She stiffened, instinctively stepping back. "They'll start soon," she said. "The looks. The questions. By noon everyone will know." He nodded. "Good." She frowned at him. "Good?" "I'm tired of pretending," he said. "Tired of acting like I've done something wrong by showing up. By caring. She studied his face, searching for doubt, for regret. There was none. Just resolve, quiet and immovable as the land he worked. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The barn creaked as it warmed in the sun. Somewhere outside, a rooster crowed, too late to matter. When they finally stepped back into the open, the day had fully claimed the valley. The fog was gone. The town was alive, and the whispers had already begun, rippling outward, gathering speed. She could hear them even before a single word reached her ears. He took her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. The bell over the cafe door rang sharp and clear, and that was all it took. Conversation snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Cups froze halfway to lips. A spoon clinked once against a saucer and then was hastily stilled. Through the wide front windows, people leaned forward without realizing they were doing it, chairs scraping softly against the floor. Outside, dust hung in the road, backlit by the sun, and in the middle of it stood the rancher and the woman. Everyone thought they understood, better than they did.
Is that...
Someone whispered. Well, I'll be... At the post office across the street, the clerk stopped sorting letters. A folded envelope slipped from his fingers and landed on the counter, forgotten. On the boardwalk, a man tying his bootlace stayed bent a second too long, pretending not to stare while staring anyway. The town had many talents, but subtlety was not one of them. They walked slowly, not because they were afraid, but because there was no reason to rush. The rancher's hand was steady around hers, his grip neither possessive nor uncertain. Hers tightened in response, a silent decision made and reinforced with every step. She felt the weight of eyes on her back, on her face, on the place where his thumb brushed her knuckles as if it had always belonged there. Someone laughed, too loud, too sudden. Someone else cleared their throat. A woman standing outside the dry goods store pressed her lips together, sharp and thin, her gaze sliding over them like a blade. From somewhere near the livery stable came a low, disapproving murmur, followed by a muttered prayer. They've lost their minds, a man said, not bothering to lower his voice. Or he has, another replied. The rancher stopped in the middle of the road. The sound of boots on wood, of murmuring voices, of the wind moving through the cottonwoods, all of it faded, as if the town itself realized it had gone a step too far. Dust settled around his boots. The woman beside him felt the pause like a held breath, felt the familiar urge to shrink, to step back, to make herself smaller, so the attention would slide past her. Instead, he turned. Not to the crowd at first, but to her. The world narrowed to his face, to the quiet certainty in his eyes. He lifted his free hand and tipped her chin upward, gentle, deliberate. Not a kiss, not a spectacle, just enough so she met his gaze fully, so anyone watching could see what he saw. A woman standing exactly where she chose to stand. She swallowed, heart hammering, but she didn't look away. Then he faced the town. I do own my place, he said, his voice carrying easily down the street, steady and unraised. And I choose who stands with me. No anger, no challenge, just a statement of fact. For a moment, no one knew what to do with that. The silence stretched, awkward and revealing. The cafe door creaked open and then closed. Again, as someone thought better of. Stepping outside, a child tugged at his mother's sleeve, confused by the sudden stillness. Even the horses seemed to sense the shift, tossing their heads and snorting softly. The woman felt something loosen inside her chest, something she hadn't realized had been clenched for years. She stood a little straighter. When someone met her eyes, she didn't drop her gaze. A man near the feed store shook his head and spat into the dust, but he didn't say anything. Another, older, leaned on his cane and studied the pair with an expression that was almost thoughtful. The woman from the dry goods store sniffed and turned away, but there was no bite in it now, only habit. The bell rang again, this time from the church down the road, marking the hour. Life, stubborn as ever, lurched forward. A wagon creaked past, its driver staring fixedly ahead as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The cafe door opened again, and this time a young woman stepped out, curiosity winning over caution. She watched them with open interest, not judgment, and when their eyes met, she smiled, small, uncertain, but real. It felt like a crack in a wall that had stood too long. The rancher squeezed the woman's hand once, a silent question. She answered by threading her fingers more firmly through his. They started walking again. Behind them, conversation resumed in uneven bursts. Some voices were sharp, others hushed. Stories were already being born, shaped to fit old expectations. But something had shifted, and even the loudest whispers couldn't quite cover it. At the edge of town, near the hitching post, an older woman stepped forward. Her hair was iron gray, her back straight despite the years. She looked at them for a long moment, eyes measuring, and then gave a single slow nod. "About time," she said, quietly enough that only they heard. The woman's throat tightened. She managed to smile in return. They passed the last row of buildings and headed toward the open road. The land stretching wide and familiar beyond. The town buzzed behind them, unsettled and alive, trying to decide what this meant, how it would be told, who would be blamed. For the first time, it didn't matter. The rancher didn't look back. He didn't need to. What mattered walked beside him, her stride matching his, her grip sure. The town could talk itself hoarse if it wanted to. Let it lose its mind. Let it learn slowly and begrudgingly that not everything existed for its approval. Ahead of them, the road curved toward open fields and sky, bright and unashamed in the afternoon sun.